let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
employee
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say a
As the
developer-
Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am Jonny Rickard. I am the host of the Ask an OpenShift admin live stream. If you are joining now, then you understand like we're actually starting a little bit later than we normally do. So we're actually starting solely in Minneapolis at a Red Hat user group. And so the times have kind of changed a little bit. So that's why we're a little bit all over the place today. So we really wanted to try something new. We wanted to try this experience having us be a part of the audience, where the audience can ask us questions along with the crowd from from our viewers, and we want to see how that type of office hour inception type thing works out. So yeah, hopefully it goes well. Hopefully the audio when Sully joins in is good, and we can hear all the questions. This is going to be this is an office hours live stream. So like any office hours that you've joined while you're in college or in high school or anything like that, we your professor would hold an office hour so you can come in and ask questions and hopefully get answers. Well, that's what Sully and I are here for. We're here to take your questions, hopefully get them answered. We don't know everything, but we will try and we'll try and make contact with the people that do know the answer, because there's a ton of smart people at Red Hat, and we at least know the buttons to push. So yeah, if you have a question, feel free to ask. It doesn't necessarily have to be on topic, but like if it's about OpenShift or Kubernetes or Red Hat or RHEL or just Linux in general or just nerd stuff, feel free to ask it. So to get started, we're going to go through a couple of the top of mind topics. And again, Sully could jump in at any time and let me know that he's ready. And when he does that, then we're just going to kick right over to the Ask an OpenShift, or I'm sorry, we're going to kick right over to the Ask Us Anything live stream. So KubeCon North America is in Salt Lake City. It's going to be 12 to 15 November. Go ahead and sign up. Like the hotels and everything are listed on the website. It looks like it's going to be a pretty big and amazing event again. And one of the co-located events is going to be OpenShift Commons. And if you want, you should sign up and go check out OpenShift Commons. OpenShift Commons is the community of OpenShift, right? So it's where all of our brothers and sisters in OpenShift are out in the wild, and it's where they ask questions, and it's where you can learn about the direction that OpenShift is going, and just be part of that greater open source community. So this link that I just attached here is going to be the sign up for the OpenShift Commons event at KubeCon. So hopefully you can make it when you go. The next one is there's an issue with the RHEL 9 version of I don't want to say there's an issue with the RHEL 9 version, because there's not an issue with RHEL 9 per se, but if you're used to downloading the OC client from the client's download inside your cluster, inside the console, and you're using RHEL 8, then you might run into a problem where the glibc version doesn't match. And that's because in RHEL 9, for it to be FIPS compliant, some of those libraries are part of the binary now. And so it causes an issue. So you'll have to go out. The workaround right now is to go out and download the RHEL 8 specific or the RHEL 9 specific OC binary, so that way you don't run into these glibc errors. And there's a support article, and it is pasted right now. And hello, Malik. Hopefully I said that right. Welcome to the live stream, and super chunky space monkey. I love it. That's a cool. I love the handle. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you're here. And I'm glad you're in person in Minneapolis. Hopefully you're giving Sully a hard time. But yeah, so with this OC binary thing, what'll happen is you'll be able to download it. Even if you go to mirror.openshift.com, if you download just like the Linux binary and you try and run the latest on top of RHEL 8, you'll run into this glibc error. And the issue is that you just need to download this specific version for your operating system, and then you'll be good to go. There's a workaround, or that is the workaround. There's a bigger fix that's in play, and we're waiting for it to drop. And as soon as it drops, I'll let you know. So part of this Red Hat presentation or part of the Red Hat user group presentation. It came up from a coworker of ours who's very active in the Red Hat user group up in the Minneapolis area. And, they knew that we were doing the live stream and, like that we're trying to do some of this outreach stuff. And we really want to get more involved with people. And so they were like, hey, would you guys like to come out to this live stream or come out to this Red Hat user group and do your live stream? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do how it goes. So I just got notification from Sully. He's about to join in. So it's about to, awesomeness is about to go down.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I know the folks in the room have already heard me say that. Hello to everybody who is online. I see that we have a number of people who have joined us live. So for anybody who hasn't seen Ask an OpenShift admin before, welcome to the stream. So this stream is an office hours live stream within Red Hat live streaming. And our goal is for you to ask us anything and everything that happens to be top of your mind with regard to OpenShift. Technically, you can ask us anything you want about Red Hat, but we might not know the answers. I haven't used RHEL extensively in a solid decade, so I can try, but I'm sure that there are far better people than me to ask, like Jonny. So for anybody who is watching us live online, you are more than welcome to chat with us across whatever platform you happen to be watching us on. It'll get rebroadcast into the stream chat, which we can see here in the room. You can't see it if you are watching us online, but this screen behind me does have the live stream on it, and it can see chat. So for those of us in the room, we can see that. For anybody in the room, don't hesitate to ask a question. I'll just repeat it into the microphone, which is the one that I'm wearing up here. And that way, everybody will hear the questions that you're answering. So please don't feel free to hesitate. We also have a few of our own staged questions that we can start out by asking, or asking as the case may be. We're happy to do that depending on what all you'd like to know. That being said, special thanks to everybody for joining us here. I hope this wasn't too much of a surprise to you, to be on the internet. I mean, I don't know. Are Jonny and I internet famous? Some people say yes. Somebody had their hand raised. Go ahead.
For the learning curve to become an OpenShift admin. So going from OS to containers to Kubernetes to OpenShift.
Yeah.
It's like a huge learning curve.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you overcome the learning curve of going from being maybe a traditional RHEL Linux admin to Kubernetes to OpenShift to all of the things that are happening in there? Typically, the way that I answer that, and Jonny, I'll let you poke on this in a little bit, because we both made this journey, right? We were both Linux admins, we were both Vert admins, we were both storage admins, right? That type of stuff. It sounds cliche, right? How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And for me, I was interested in containers, Podman, that was happening on the RHEL side. And as I started to gain more knowledge around that, it was, okay, what's this Kubernetes thing? And then how does Kubernetes fit together? And Kubernetes is just pods, right? Or containers, just like Podman or Docker, that's just scheduled across a cluster. And then you start introducing more things. That being said, the cheat sheet is things like Red Hat Learning, right? Going and doing, I always recommend everybody start with DO080. It's completely free. Anybody can go and register for it. It's an online course. It's self-paced. I think it's 2 or 4 hours in length. You can go and register for it. DO180 is a great one. It takes it to the next step as far as containerized applications, stuff like that. So how do I deploy applications, manage applications inside of the clusters? And then last but not least is DO280, which is more on the administrator side. So that's learning course-wise, that type of stuff. That's usually the route that I would suggest taking. But me, I'm a hands-on learner. I love to be hands-on, breaking things. One of the great things about OpenShift is I can Google most things, or DuckDuckGo as the case may be, or whatever your preferred search engine. Turns out DuckDuckGo is backed by Bing. I didn't know that until recently. I think it's just rebranded Bing searches. Anyways, you can search most errors and they'll pop up. And you can always open a support case as well. Jonny, anything to add?
No, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like when I was transitioning from being a RHEL admin over to a Kubernetes admin, I think the big thing for me was just like when I was learning Linux, I went and bought a book, like a Michael Jang book, and I just sat there and I went through the chapters, and like solely I'm hands-on. So as long as I could bang it out and kind of see like, okay, look, I read what he says, I did the thing, here's the output. And then what I started doing is I started kind of like like, okay, how can I take these same services that my company is using and do the same thing in Linux? Like, how can I implement DNS? How can I implement email or DHCP or any of that stuff? And then that's how I started like broadening my Linux knowledge. With Kubernetes, it was pretty much the same thing. It's like, okay, how do I one, get it deployed? How do I deploy an application? How do I manage the application? Like, how do I update like the CRUD thing? How do I create it? How do I update it? How do I delete it? Right. And once I got that figured out, then I just started moving on to more advanced topics.
Yeah, and I think tying in with that, so Barbarossa here in chat is asking, a platform engineer working on OpenShift, should I start with the CKA certified Kubernetes administrator or EX188? I would generically suggest the CKA. And I say that because everything in the CKA applies to OpenShift, but not everything in OpenShift applies to Kubernetes, right? OpenShift is a superset of Kubernetes. So generally speaking, CKA is going to get you a lot of foundational work. It'll get you a lot of information about how sort of the core set of things works, including and especially for the application side of things. The OpenShift stuff starts to focus on more of the platform management aspects, where OpenShift is really unique and different than a lot of other Kubernetes platforms is it's top to bottom management in one platform. Right? So when I go and deploy my OpenShift cluster, it's CoreOS running on whatever the base underlying infrastructure is, right? Virtual or physical. It's machine config operator for managing the configuration of those machines. It's machine config pools for managing the configuration of the operating system, so on and so forth. So as you add on those things, right, you get further and further away from core Kubernetes, if you will. So that CKA will always apply with every Kubernetes, even if you decide not to continue with OpenShift.
Yeah,
which we would never do that. Yeah, we would never do that. Always OpenShift. Is there any other questions here, Jonny?
There are. One of them is, so the latest one is it possible to run OKD on a bunch of Raspberry Pis, like 5 or 6 of them, Raspberry Pi 5s? Documentation on OKD installation is painfully sparse, and most guides are 3 to 4 years old.
I don't think so, because I don't think the Raspberry Pi runs ARM64, does it?
I don't know.
I don't think it does it. Okay, it might be able to then. I honestly haven't looked. So OpenShift does support ARM64. I think we typically recommend, I want to say 2 cores and 60 or 4 cores and 16 gigabytes of memory as the minimum. I don't know if Pi 5 goes up to that. I admit I have not had time to check in on it. I'm still running a Pi 3B in my house, so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that would be a good one. A good one to find out. I know that home lab wise, most folks, myself included, a lot of Red Hat folks, because we have a pretty vibrant home lab community inside of Red Hat. Most folks are still running x86. There's a number of sites where you can go and farm information out of eBay to get discount servers. So depending on whether or not you enjoy the sound of, server fans in your house, that may be an option. Me personally, I use just old repurposed desktops and laptops. Literally, I have I repurpose my kids' gaming desktops when they're at school or when they're not otherwise using them, and I just dual boot them over into Linux and then run virtual machines off of those. They think it's hilarious until they want to use them. Pi 5 goes up to 8 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, maybe.
I think if you do something like if you generate the ISO and you do like a snow, where you generate the ISO and stuff like that, or you maybe do like the agent-based installer outside of the UI, then you can probably build the image and deploy it. But just your mileage is going to vary and your performance is going to be hit really bad. But yeah. It's doable, but it just won't be pretty.
Okay. Yeah, Tiger, you don't need ECC memory for OpenShift. It is not required. Somebody in the room had a question.
Pretty much we're looking at OpenShift and specifically running its demo set. But we get a little bit confused on documentation for actually setting up a bare metal cluster.
Okay.
What does the installation process look like if you just get bare metal server for saying you're going to get a cluster up?
Yeah. So let me recap the question because unfortunately nobody else can hear me talk, or nobody can hear y'all talk, just me. So wanting to investigate bare metal OpenShift for OpenShift virtualization, but the install docs are, I'm going to be generous and say overwhelming. And basically, what's that process, right? So a couple of things. So one, we know that the docs are confusing, shall we say. So let me see. I'm going to pull this, go to docs. So a couple of things that I want to point out here. I'm going to share my screen. I hope that's the right one. So the docs team is working on making that a little bit better. So if you haven't looked at the docs recently, they've started to reorganize these. So installing on bare metal, to your point, is still not great, right? It's a little disorganized. It's also a little spread out because you can install in bare metal using the installing on bare metal section of the documents here. There's agent-based installer, there's assisted installer, there's appliance installer, there's zero touch or ZTP, zero touch provisioning. There's, gosh, what am I missing? There's bare metal UPI, there's bare metal IPI. Say bare metal UPI, it's really just a non-integrated install. When we come down here to some of these sections, so they started with vSphere. You see it's organized a little bit differently in what I think is better in this regard. I'll also take this opportunity to point out that we should all start mentally switching over to, and you see I still do it by default, docs.openshift.com. So all of the documentation is moving over to docs.redhat.com. So just mentally start making those adjustments. Somebody, I think it was Greg, was talking about how DNF is the new Yum. I knew I had graduated to RHEL 8 when I stopped in my head going, not Yum, DNF. Now it's whenever I go back to a RHEL 7 system or a CentOS 7 system, I have to remember Yum, not DNF, right? So docs.openshift versus docs.redhat is going to be the same way. Anyways, to more directly answer your question, so there's a couple of things to be aware of. So one is choosing whether or not you want the cloud provider integration. So what that means is when I go to the platform integrations, I have the bare metal integration. And the bare metal integration with OpenShift is what gives it the ability to talk to the BMCs on those hosts. So can OpenShift reach out and talk to that host and do things like power on, power off, that type of stuff? So if the answer to that is yes, then the next question is, do I want it to do automated provisioning of cluster nodes from the very beginning or only after initial deployment? So if I have, say, 3 servers and I say, I just want this thing to install itself, you do an IPI, an installer provisioned infrastructure deployment. This means that you have to set up things like Pixie, or there's also another method that the name is escaping me. Jonny, please chime in if you remember. So you can do like a Pixie boot where it will Pixie boot those hosts. It will push out CoreOS to them. It will load them. It will join them to the cluster. Alternatively, you can manually install CoreOS to those nodes and install the cluster and get everything stood up. And then day 2, you would go in and add additional bare metal nodes. Confusingly, and I've already talked to the docs team about this, it's under the installing on bare metal section, but we have this scaling a user provisioned installation with the bare metal operator. What this does is it's after the initial deployment, you go in and you do that exact same set of things, right? I create a new, let me get down here to the thing. I create a new bare metal host definition that says, here is my host, here is the BMC address, here's the credentials to connect into it. And now I can go in and say, OpenShift, there's a new bare metal host out there. Please push OpenShift, CoreOS onto it and join it to this cluster. So the difference there is it standing up from the very beginning, instantiating the cluster automatically, pushing out that configuration, or am I just joining nodes later, doing that with that automatically? The third option is to do everything manually, which is just a non-integrated or platform non-based cluster. So the actual install process can also be confusing. They are working on making this better in the documentation as well. So the main thing that you'll want to look at is this page here, installing a user provision cluster on bare metal. I feel like this page does a little bit better job of walking through all of the install steps. At a high level, you use the installer. I always recommend by default use either agent-based or assisted installer. So you would go to the assisted installer, and I don't know if I'm logged in. Jonny, while I'm logging in, do you have anything to add?
No, you're killing it, man. Like, this is awesome.
So if I go to Red Hat OpenShift and I go to cluster list, create cluster. So I want to go to data center and I choose this assisted installer option. So when I do this, right, I give it a name. I select some other things inside of here. So we'll call this test.com. Clearly it's not validating these. So I select a number of other things from inside of here. When I click next, what it's going to do is, when I get there, once I click this add host, it's going to give me an ISO. I download this ISO, I boot my physical nodes to this ISO, and then they will pop into this interface. So in order to use the software as a service assisted installer, you do need to have internet access for those nodes. Once they join here, I can go in on this interface and say, oh, I want this node to be a control plane. I want this one to be a worker node. I want this one to be a control plane, so on and so forth. I can configure other things about it. If I want to set static IPs, all that other stuff. That'll get you set up to the basic cluster set things. By far the easiest way, in my opinion. If you're disconnected or if you cannot get internet access for these, you can still have this experience, but you have to already have a cluster. For better or for worse. Basically, you do it through ACM, Advanced Cluster Manager, using the infrastructure environments feature. But this is by far the easiest way to get up and running with a bare metal cluster, in my opinion. Agent-based installer is similar. Agent-based installer is just YAML-based. So basically, I go in through the YAML and say, here's my nodes, and then I generate the ISO and I boot them, and it installs the cluster instantiates it. I don't have to use the GUI to do it. Yep. Yeah. So using agent-based assisted installer, all these, they also self-bootstrap. So you don't have to have a separate bootstrap node. Did I miss any install methods, Jonny?
No. And like using the agent-based installer the assisted installer, it is so nice. Like, especially like when if you're just getting started and maybe you're not super technical, or like you don't, I don't know, I feel like it's the lowest barrier to entry when you're trying to get started with all this, because it's like you literally go in, you add some configs, you download the ISO, and then from there it's like deploying any other machine. So it's very nice.
I feel like I'm talking to the voice of God whenever I talk to Jonny. I'm looking at the ceiling. And the other nice thing about assisted installer and agent-based and infrastructure environments are the same. It does a lot of pre-checks in your environment as well. So for example, when you boot that ISO, in this inventory, if you tick that this is a control plane node, in the background, it will actually go and it'll run an FIO test in order to gauge whether or not the underlying storage is fast enough for low enough latency for things like etcd. It looks at the network interfaces and it'll raise up flags and issues if it sees them. Hey, there's two separate network adapters that are on the same subnet. This is not an issue. Are you sure you don't want to bond these network adapters together? Stuff like that. So assisted installer is just really a phenomenal experience in my opinion.
Yeah,
it's a good starting point.
And something that we were talking about earlier, Sully, is like when the assisted installer is going to go in, it's going to do the check, right? It's going to say, do you meet the minimum requirements for deploying a control plane, or the minimum requirements for deploying a worker compute node? If you do like the ISO generation outside of the assisted installer UI, it'll bypass those checks. But again, your mileage will vary on performance and stuff like that. But like to be able to deploy on like a smaller platform, it's very much it is possible if you use the ISO builder and you generate all the content yourself.
We don't bypass safety checks, Sean.
I know. I'm just saying you could. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying you could.
I haven't been able to see chat. Did we miss anything in the online chat?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. One from Barbarossa52. They are trying to update from EUS 4.12 to 4.14, but the step to 4.13 causes the master nodes and infra nodes to lose some labels, and those labels are causing like the topology labels are falling off. So then the console and authentication operators aren't coming up all the way. So then the deployment never completes.
That sounds like a bug.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would open a support case on that one. And because that should not be happening. So for anybody who isn't aware, so with the EUS versions, which are the even numbered versions of OpenShift, we support, what are they called right now, Johnny? The accelerated updates, I think is what we're calling them. So effectively, you pause updates on the worker nodes in the cluster, and then you update just the control plane from 4.12 to 4.13 to 4.14, and then you unpause the worker nodes, and they make a jump in one step from 4.12 to 4.14. I think we're changing the name of that in the future to be a control plane of only updates or something like that. I don't remember. That's why I stuttered, because I have to remember what's reality today versus what's reality in the future. So anyways, so that's what that's referring to with why that's happening. So this is to your point about bare metal. So this is something that's important with bare metal clusters in particular, in my opinion, because bare metal takes forever to reboot, right? Modern servers, especially if we're hosting virtual machines, we're talking 1-2 more terabytes of memory. They take like 10 or 15 minutes to reboot. If I have a specific maintenance window and I have to go through and reboot all of these servers, and if I don't tune them and they happen sequentially, now it can take a very long time. So doing the accelerated updates means there's only one reboot involved instead of 2 with each one of those. Just something to be aware of. But yeah, if it's losing labels, that's definitely a bug. Definitely open a support case. They'll be able to address that with you and help out there.
Awesome. And then we also have another question from Bill Barson. It says, with the increase in space, or with the increased space Proxmox is making, is there any plan for an IPI on this platform? So basically, is there going to be an IPI installer for Proxmox?
I have not seen anything. This is one of those, I don't think I have. Sorry, I'm trying to type and talk and use one hand at a time. So one thing that you may not be aware of is everything inside of the Red Hat OpenShift roadmap is public. I suppose I need to share this tab, don't I? So if we go here and we go to here and share. All right, so what you're looking at is issues.redhat.com. So you'll note I am not logged in, right? If you look up in the upper right-hand window, I had to think about that. Yeah, I'm not logged in. And what I can search for is, I'm going to search for cores and Proxmox. So why did I put cores, C-O-R-S, in front of that? So that is the project name that we use for the installer team. How do I know that? So up here in projects, you can go to view all projects, and you can search down through here, and you'll eventually find the one that says installer, the OpenShift installer, with the key of cores. So if I type in here, up in the search, C-O-R-S, Proxmox, when I search, it will search specifically within the OpenShift installer project. And you can see that there are no issues at this time. What that tells me is that nobody has even opened a feature request for us to support Proxmox with OpenShift. So if that's something that's interesting to you, if you're starting to, if you're considering Proxmox, if you're going to be deploying OpenShift or want to deploy OpenShift on Proxmox, I would definitely start with an RFE. That being said, it's probably going to be a journey to get there. The reason why I say that is because OpenShift, the platforms that it's supported on, starts with RHEL. Right? Everything is built on top of CoreOS. CoreOS, the full name is Red Hat Enterprise Linux CoreOS. It's literally RHEL that's been tailored for OpenShift and for Kubernetes. So it's RHEL kernel, RHEL drivers, RHEL everything, just using RPM OS tree instead of a traditional RPM-based system. So the first step that we would need to do is add Proxmox as a supported platform for RHEL. So if we search for RHEL certified,
you've got rule up there.
Yeah, I know.
It looks like
Can't type and talk.
Okay.
So RHEL certified hypervisors. Are you the one I want? Did my browser help me? So RHEL certified hypervisor platforms. And this is just the FAQ. anyways, if we search in access.redhat.com, there is a list of RHEL certified hypervisor platforms. It includes RHEL itself, right? You can virtualize RHEL on RHEL, as well as any of the RHEL-derived hypervisors, OpenStack, Red Hat Virtualization, OpenShift Virtualization, Hyper-V, VMware, and one that I'm missing. What am I missing? Nutanix. Thank you. So those are the platforms that are currently supported today. So supporting new Proxmox in the future would mean that we get RHEL certified as a guest on Proxmox, and then at that point, we would inherit non-integrated platform none support with OpenShift, and then we would work with the OpenShift team to then add support for integrated machine integration. So behind the scenes, that means things like creating cluster API providers and drivers for that. Any thoughts, Jonny?
No, I was it kind of like goes back to like the, you know, could you, should you conversation. Like if there's somebody out there that's done a Proxmox installer. So, you know, like it's just, it'll be OpenShift, but it wouldn't be through like an IPI or anything like that. And again, mileage may vary.
Yeah, I'll point out that Proxmox is also, I think is it KVM based or is it Zen based? I don't remember. It's KVM, so it'll probably work. It's just not supported. So if you have Proxmox in your home lab, for example, and you want to deploy OpenShift, it's probably going to work. If you have it in your business, it will probably work. We just wouldn't be able to support it. We would take it's the third-party software support stance, which is basically, you know, hey, if we think it's because of the problem you're running on, please recreate it on a platform that supports that. Any questions in the room while I'm looking at chat? Yes, sir, please.
So this is my first Red Hat user group.
Welcome.
I would like to explain what problem OpenShift solves and how do you explain the return on investment to the director.
Yeah. So first, welcome. Happy to see you joining the Red Hat user group. So this is my, I don't know, 10th or 20th one. I go to a few of them around at various places, mostly in the Raleigh area because that's where I'm based out of. But thanks for joining. So the question was, you know, new to OpenShift, you know, what's basically my short version is what's the value prop, right? How do we explain and how do we define the value associated with that? You know, we're talking to IT decision makers, right? So the way that I typically look at it is it's the same as the standard message that we have with the value of any Red Hat subscription, right? You can, of course, go and you can utilize quite literally all of the same bits, packages, everything else for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right, upstream with various other things as well. Why do you choose to do it with Red Hat? One, support, right? You can pick up the phone, you can call somebody, right? We're there to help. We're there to provide all of those things inside of that ecosystem, if you will. Two, and with OpenShift specifically, why would I choose OpenShift over another Kubernetes distribution? So this is where it gets a little bit more subjective and opinionated. So one, Red Hat does that same thing of, if you think of Red Hat Enterprise Linux as being a collection of a few thousand disparate packages, right, applications that are all brought together to form a cohesive Linux, we do the same thing with Kubernetes and OpenShift. So Kubernetes by itself, I can schedule pods across some cluster members. What about operating system management? What about security management? What about storage? What about networking? What about all of these other things that go inside of there just to get Kubernetes up and running? From an application perspective, what about, you know, when I want to do things like pipelines, you know, CI/CD? Well, we have Tecton. If I want to do GitOps, there's Argo CD. Red Hat tests these things end to end, and we integrate all of those into that platform. Anthony's team over here, which Jonny is a part of, they're a great example of doing exactly that end-to-end testing, right? When we say, you know, hey, look at this really cool thing that you can do with OpenShift, and then we create a validated pattern out of that that says, we go through and here's the 40 different pieces that are associated with it, and every time any one of those components changes versions, right? GitOps goes from version 1.1 to 1.2, or OpenShift goes from 4.16.9 to 4.16.10, so on and so forth. They test all of that. They validate it. That is going to continue to work so that when you go and update your cluster, you can be confident and assured that your cluster is going to continue to work as well. If it doesn't, you can pick up the phone and call us. So Docker years and years ago used to use the phrase batteries included but replaceable. The same is true with OpenShift as well. Right? You don't have to use our service mesh, which is Istio based. If you want to use one of the other ones, that's fine. You can absolutely do that. There's JC. I don't know if JC is still in the room, right? JC used to work on OCS, OpenShift Container Storage, right? It's a part of the Red Hat, or now it's ODF, OpenShift Data Foundation, which is now sort of IBM, sort of Red Hat's, but like you can absolutely use that. It's a part of our portfolio. It's something that is tightly integrated with OpenShift, or not. You can use Portworx, you can use NetApp, you can use Dell EMC, you can use Hitachi Fujitsu, any number of others. Sorry, I think I just caused feedback in my ear. That was startling. Did that answer the question?
So I work at a hospital and we have purchase all the apps and they're all tied together. Use Epic and stuff like that. So I don't even have a great idea of like it sounded like it's like we bundle all this together, it's all Kubernetes based.
Mm-hmm.
Now you hit a problem where I don't understand when I would use Kubernetes.
Got it. Yeah. So if you want to talk about specific ROI, I would recommend, so through your account team, they have access to a team of folks called the Business Value Practice Team. They can actually come in and help you look at specific ROI and TCO metrics and like how that plays out. So definitely chat with your account team about that. As far as like when to use Kubernetes, like all of that other stuff, that's going to vary significantly. So you said your healthcare industry, right? Applications are brought in, I don't know how much internal house developed stuff you have versus vendors. Yeah.
So that's what I associate with this. Kubernetes is really used for industry that does their development and trying to put together a product and release a product and basically hospitals are more you buy the OS or not the OS, but you buy certain software packages. It's a lot of operational stuff, not too much.
It's almost appliance based, right?
Yeah. No development. That's they don't like some development. There's a bigger hospital organization. That was the basis of the question.
So succinct version of that is if I'm not doing in-house developments, if I don't have app teams that are developing applications for Kubernetes, why do I care? So the short answer is, and I'll see you. Okay.
Especially if you talk about in-house development applications.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole bunch of like Tomcat constellations or web-based constellations, and we found that once you can take your application and containerize it, you now have a lot easier deployment paths. And so a lot of our applications that come in-house might get put into a container, or they'll come as a vendor tools container if you spin up.
Yeah. So I'm not talking into the microphone. I'm talking to you, Jonny, and basically repeating what he's saying, which is containerized applications make deployment a lot easier. And getting COTS applications into Kubernetes often has its own set of challenges. But if you can work with those vendors and get them moved over, it's beneficial. So that way I'm not having to wait and repeat questions as they go through.
Right now, you don't have an in-house development team that's giving you containers, but it's not going to be too long before the software you get from your vendor is a container, and you're going to want to learn how to.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say, which is, no, y'all are good. Thank you. It's always better to hear it from y'all than it is from me, right? Because I'm paid to say these things.
Healthcare-related applications, like I don't know if anybody's familiar with Thunderhill, or Clarity, or even like, for example, CyberArk, if anybody uses CyberArk. A lot of their stuff is becoming containerized. I'm spearheading as they hold their
Continuing to point out that many of the applications are becoming containerized. If you see me up here mumbling, it's because I'm talking out to the world and kind of repeating what you all are saying, not because I'm ignoring you or anything like that. I'm just doing a summary as we go.
Can I get a translator for everything now?
Yeah. That's surprisingly more difficult to work with than you would expect. I've done presentations before where they have translators off to the side, and I keep getting told, slow down, slow down. The translators can't keep up. It's very... Anyways, yeah. So the short version of all of that is effectively whether or not you're doing in-house development today that's using Kubernetes, more and more vendors are starting to evolve towards Kubernetes. There's several analyst reports that have come out recently that are talking about that. They're updates to ones that were put out back 3 and 4 years ago, talking about percentage of applications that are being shipped natively as Kubernetes coming from vendors. You're in healthcare industry. I actually just had an EBC with one of your vendors the other day where they're looking at moving a lot of their stuff over into Kubernetes inside of the hospitals and having one cluster in the hospital that all of the edge devices talk to and roll things up and out to and stuff like that. I think the question becomes, and this is one of those, like, this isn't a question for any one industry, are we going to start seeing Kubernetes become an appliance? We already see it in some places, right? A lot of times, even Red Hat, we did this in Red Hat Virtualization 4.4, 4.3 and 4.4. We actually shipped OpenShift 3.11 as an appliance inside of Red Hat Virtualization to act as the metrics and monitoring service. So every Red Hat Virtualization 4.3, 4.4 customer was also an OpenShift customer. They just didn't know it for the most part. So yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's getting more interesting in that regard. So I know our time slot here is for another, I'm going to say 7 minutes. So I know Mark just told me 10 minutes, but I'm going to say 7. So I see your question here in the room. Do you mind if I think we have 1 or 2 questions in the chat. Okay. Jonny.
Yeah. So one of the suggestions was that we do a installation stream on basic generic commodity hardware, right? Like a multi-node bare metal deployment. And I told him, like, yep, absolutely. We've been talking about it for a long time. Like this.
I was going to say, you and I have been talking about an install marathon for at least a year, if not 2 at this point.
Yes. And then another question was, does OpenShift support the new Intel processors with the big little architectures, i.e. does it play well with performance and efficiency cores?
I want to say yes. How well it understands them, I don't know. So I don't know the answer to this. Let me think of how to say this. I don't know the answer, but because it's literally the RHEL kernel and the RHEL kernel scheduler, CFS, so long as RHEL understands it, OpenShift will also be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
What I don't know is, can I use CPU Manager or something like that in OpenShift to identify the performance versus efficiency cores and say, create different categories of those. And I only want my application to be deployed and using performance cores, not efficiency cores. I don't know the answer to that, but we can certainly find out.
I feel like the KubeBurner team would probably have some information on that. Like I feel like we talked about this with them before a long time ago, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. Who was the PM that we had on that we talked about node tuning with?
Don't give me lines. It's been so many.
he's French, and I cannot remember his name. Anyways, that's who we're gonna. I'll reach out to him, and we'll get an answer to that. We'll follow up next week.
Yep. Awesome. All right, and then the last one is from Bill Barson. They asked if we could explain how to get the developer's license, so that way they can get a subscription to OpenShift.
Oh yeah. So OpenShift is included with the Red Hat developer entitlement. So anybody can go to developers.redhat.com. You can register for an account, and for 365 days, you have access to up to 16 nodes of OpenShift. On the 366th day, you just have to go in and refresh your developer account, and you can continue to access those things. So one thing to note, when you do that, you'll have access. You saw me browse to console.redhat.com before and go through all that. It'll give you a pull secret, all those other things. You can't actually go in and title those clusters. So inside of my cluster here, I'm going to share my screen again so that way the world can see it. So I have an OpenShift cluster here, right? And if I go to the home overview, you'll see down here, it says, service level agreement, self-support 60-day trial with 59 days remaining. If you're using a developer entitlement, you essentially can't entitle it, right? There's nothing for it to entitle to. That will expire. It changes nothing. You don't lose access to any packages. You can go into Operator Hub here. You can deploy all the things, right? It doesn't change all of that. It's still a self-supported cluster of up to 16 nodes that you have full ability to use. I'll note that developer entitlements are good for single user, non-production use cases only. If you want multi-user non-production, there's a set of developer entitlements that you can use for that. So I don't know if there's any Red Hat account people in the room. They can help you understand all of those things and how to get access to it. But yeah, it's literally developers.redhat.com. Go and register for an account. And then once a year, go in and it should generate an email to you, but you just go in and click the button that says refresh my developer account and you're good to go.
Yep.
And that includes not just OpenShift, but RHEL and a bunch of other products inside there as well.
Yep. So real quick, Andrew, Bill asked if the developer license also has access to ACM and ACS.
It does not. I asked about that recently and was told no. I don't know if any of our ACM or ACS folks are watching. Cough, cough, Michael Foster. But maybe we should add that. There was one in the room.
Quick question: does the OpenShift service mesh, is it Istio ambient or just standard Istio?
So the question is the OpenShift service mesh Istio or Istio ambient? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's just the regular Istio. Jonny, maybe you know off the top of your head.
I'm not sure what Istio ambient is, but even with service mesh 3, they're moving to SAIL. So they're moving away from like the traditional Istio deployment, but yeah, it's still Istio. I'm not sure about the ambient part though.
Ultimately, the difference is Istio ambient is installed per node versus the Envoy sidecar. So that's
okay. So Istio ambient is installed per node versus using the sidecar. It's good to know. I will find out. That's a question for Ortwin, Jonny.
Yep, I agree. All right.
Yes, sir.
How easy is it to tie the OpenShift Azure instance to an on-site?
Yeah, so recapping the question, so you're wanting to use or considering using OpenShift in Azure, and how easy is it to link the OpenShift in Azure to on-prem resources, bare metal or otherwise? I don't know the answer to that directly. In AWS terms, it would be taking the VPC and extending it on-prem, through like a VPN, linking it or something like that. Jonny, you have far more cloud experience than I do.
Yeah, not so much with Azure, but like typically you'd set up like an external service and then, access, like we used to have like a satellite that would sit out in an environment and then we'd go and hit it from, we just set up like an external service and then hit it that way. But yeah, I would have to, it's been so long.
Okay.
I would have to go back and look.
It is doable, yeah. If you want to reach out to me, if you can't see it on the little tiny screen up here, it's Sully, SULLY at redhat.com. And we'll follow up on that and I'll connect you with the right people, because the person who I am 99.9% sure knows the answer to that is one of the people that works for me. So we can get that answer for you. There was one more that I saw. This will be the last one that at least I answer. You're gonna, if you want to continue on, Jonny, you can. But there's one more I saw you posted in chat.
Yep. So it is from Barbarossa, and the question is it possible to use vSphere storage vMotion as a disaster recovery to recover complete clusters? We don't use any PVs for storage. And you're talking about restoring VMs. I saved this one for you because I know that this is one of your favorite topics.
Yeah, officially no, unofficially maybe. Because if the cluster is non-integrated, then I would say yes. If the cluster is integrated, then it could probably come back up, and you would have to go in and like change all of the, vCenter integrations, assuming it changed vCenters and stuff like that. Where it would definitely not work is if the networking changed. So if any of the IP addresses change, anything like that changed, then it would definitely not, the cluster would not be able to come back up. That being said, the official response is going to be no, because it's not a scenario that's tested by engineering. So therefore, they don't know what can go wrong, and they don't know how to fix things necessarily that go wrong without a lot of in-depth work. And usually in those types of scenarios, you want to get it back as quickly as possible. So yeah, there's a Red Hat. We don't do a great job often of explaining things that are technically possible but not supported, like supported but not tested, and tested and supported. And a great example of this is actually OpenShift virtualization. So with OpenShift virtualization, if you go and look at the configuration maximums for like virtual machines, it'll say like the maximum virtual machine disk size is, I think, 4 terabytes or 8 terabytes or something like that. In reality, that's just this maximum that they've tested. The actual maximum is whatever the RHEL virtual machine maximum size is. I think it's like 64 terabytes or 256 or something like that. It's something crazy. So we've tested up to this point. We know that there are no sharp corners or edges that you're going to stumble into in the dark. Once you go beyond that, you're still fully supported. There might be dragons, right? So there's other things where, like somebody was asking me the other day about something else related to VMware, and like, can I basically? They wanted to take a VMware cluster and move it to a different data center non-disruptively. Well, technically, it's probably possible to effectively add a new machine set and instantiate new virtual machines in the new one, and then decommission in the old one and have it move over. But nobody's ever tested it, so we don't know. And so, generally speaking, it's going to be, those things are not supported. Please use one of the supported methods. All right, I've extinguished not just my 7, but my full 10 minutes that Mark gave me here a moment ago. So, Jonny, I'm going to drop off of the live stream. So you are welcome to keep doing what you're going to do. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This has been an exciting experiment for us, looking at doing other things with the live stream, and it's really great to have like the interactivity and actually see people instead of just seeing little icons and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll have to work on. We'll need to figure out. To be Red Hat transparent. Legal terrifies me, and like when legal says like when I go to legal and it's like you have to ask people every single time if you're going to record them if they're okay with recording it. Well, there's like 60 of y'all. And like, I don't want any of y'all to be intimidated or peer pressured into saying yes when you don't actually mean yes or anything like that. So we'll have to figure it out. But it is what it is, and I think this has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for all of your patience and your innovation. And with that, Jonny, I'm going to drop off.
All right, man. Thank you. Thanks everybody in the room. Appreciate it. Awesome. So Tiger, to answer your question, the question is OpenShift good for home lab without a UPS? Does recovery from a power outage require a bootstrap machine? And the answer is no. OpenShift is fine without a UPS. And what'll happen is once you come back up, the API should be able to recover. But if it's over a certain amount of time, so say if your cluster went down over a weekend, or maybe I don't know what the timeline is anymore, but like maybe 2 or 3 days, what could potentially happen is when the machine comes back up, you might have certificate requests that are stuck in a pending state, and so you would just have to go back in and do like an approve on those certificate requests. And then once you approve them, then the operators can start to reconcile, and then they'll come back up. It'll take a little bit of time for the cluster to catch up, but then once all the CSRs are approved, the operators will come back up, and then the cluster will be available again. So yeah, you don't have to have an UPS. An UPS is great, but yeah, it'll run just fine without one. So to everybody else that's not in the Minneapolis RHUG, thank you for joining. I don't know if you have any more questions. If you do, feel free to ask them. If you don't want to ask them, or if you're watching this at a different time, feel free to reach out to Sully or I. You can hit me up on email at jonny@redhat.com, or you can hit up Andrew or Sully rather at sully@redhat.com. We're hopefully one of us will be at KubeCon. Hopefully one of us will be around at like all the major events coming up. So if you see us, please come up and say hello. We'd love to talk to you. Hopefully we'll have some swag that we can hand out, maybe a sticker, or, maybe it might just be a little fist bump, who knows? But yeah, I think it was a unique and interesting experiment to have half of the stream in a live audience and then the other half on a live stream. So maybe we can do some more interesting things like this, and maybe get the timing and everything worked out, so that way we're not kind of like stopping and starting and stopping and starting. So but hey, thanks again for everybody joining. If you have any questions, feel free to get them in, and otherwise we'll see you next week. Oh, sorry, you're dealing with like high energy Jonny here, and I apologize. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to do a couple of disconnected installation type of live stream. So we're going to go through mirroring the content. There's a few different ways that you can mirror it, especially with the OC Mirror version 2 plugin that just came out. Right, it's tech preview. And so we'll be using that. It's really neat. If you've used OC Mirror version 1, you know that it works really well, but it can be a little clunky sometimes. And the V2 it's very, very nice. And so we'll go through how to use like the mirror to mirror, and then mirror from like a file system, mirror to file system, and then into your registry, and then deploy a virtual machine like a Snow on a VM or something like that. So stay tuned. We've got a lot coming up. There's gonna be a lot of good things coming up with OpenShift and just some of the layered products in general as we're coming up on KubeCon. So yeah, stay tuned, and we're looking forward to talking about it and having people come on and nerd out with us. So yes, again, if you have any questions, reach out to Sully or myself, and we'll be glad to get them answered for you. Until then, y'all have a good one, and I will see you next week.